Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. In case this is your first episode, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Narad Muni, and I am a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. And I am a traveling musician and a storyteller by profession. I used to walk around with a veena for several millennia, but podcasting has made my job so much easier. This week, we'll continue the story of the Ramayana, in which we'll see how good things happen if your horse is in charge of expanding your kingdom. The character this week is a real historical queen who broke all kinds of stereotypes to defend her people. A quick disclaimer. There's some reference to violence against animals in this week's story. On the banks of the river Sarayu was the country of Koshal, and in it was the city of Ayodhya. The name Ayodhya literally translates to the city no one can challenge at war. Ayodhya was founded by Manu himself. This wasn't the same Manu from the unicorn fish episode. Manu is a generic name for the first person, and as there have been several cycles of destruction and rebirth, the first person in each rebirth cycle was called Manu. So, the Manu being referred to here was the first person from the current cycle. Anyway, to carry on, the infrastructure of Ayodhya included 60 miles of roads with lots of flowers and mango trees. Public musicians and singers, countless elephants and cattle and camels and mules could be seen in the city. There were jewel-encrusted buildings. The people of Ayodhya were rich, if the jewel-encrusted buildings wasn't enough of a hint. Merchants came from far and wide to trade there. People were content, no one complained, everyone had enough to eat. The warriors who lived in the city had been known to have killed lions and tigers and wolves in single combat. Ayodhya's ruler was King Dasharath, who was not just a good king but a great one. He had 3 wives, Kaushalya, Kaikeyi, and Sumitra. King Dasharath called his council of ministers and announced that he would perform 2 rituals. He wanted to grow his kingdom, because what king doesn't want to do that? So, he wanted to perform the Ashwamedha. Ashwa means horse, and the first part of the ritual is an interesting one. The horse was set free and allowed to roam wherever it chose. Whichever kingdom the horse wandered into, the ruler there had basically 2 choices: submit to King Dasharath or resist. To make it an even fight, Dasharath sent thousands of his soldiers with the horse. Yup, the same ones who killed lions, tigers, and wolves with their bare hands. This went on as the horse continued its wandering. I don't know what they would have done if the horse chose never to return. But then, I suppose the thousands of soldiers probably had instructions to nudge the horse back at some point. Remember how I said that people in Ayodhya were content? That did not include the king and his queens. That was because they had no children. And Dasharath wasn't getting any younger. King Dasharath had no sons and no daughters either, but Valmiki didn't bother calling that out. The lack of heirs worried Dasharath every day. As he had no sons, he would perform a ritual that was tailor-made for this situation. It was called the Putra Kameshchi Yagya, which literally means a ritual because I wish to have sons. His chief minister was a very wise man called Sumantra. Sumantra spoke to the king privately and said, "You know what? A wise man made a prediction a long time ago that you would have a son." "A long time ago?" asked Dasharath. And you're only telling me now because... Look, do you want to hear the prediction or not? Asked Sumantra. Okay, don't get on your high horse, said Dasharath. It's real simple, said Sumantra. All you have to do is to recruit Rishya Shringa. Rishya what? Asked Dasharath. Look, I'm just going to call him Rish, said Sumantra. Rish is a rishi. That should make it easy for you. He lives in a faraway land. If you haven't heard earlier episodes, you can think of a rishi as a wise man. Sumantra continued. The king of that land was called Lomapad, which literally means clay feet. Clay feet normally means having serious faults that aren't apparent until after you meet the person. But King Clayfeet was all fault. He lived a very immoral life. That's why his people were punished for it with a drought. I don't get it, interrupted Dasharath. Why were his people punished if he was immoral? Sumantra ignored him and continued. King Clayfeet, advised by his ministers and his rishis, was told that if he could recruit Rish the rishi, the drought would end. And Clayfeet did recruit Rish by doing what he knew best, by sending over rich food and girls from his court over, and also offering to marry his daughter to Rish. Now, I'd like to think that King Clayfeet's daughter agreed to the marriage to Rish, but I know I'm just being too optimistic here. Anyway, the drought did end, and Rish is staying over at King Clayfeet's palace, said Sumantra. Dasharath said, I don't know, seems pretty weak. Okay, Rish may have ended a drought, but that's not nearly the same thing as what we need. Okay, I won't interrupt, he added as Sumantra glared at him. The chief minister then continued. The prophecy goes on to say that King Dasharath would make friends with Rish and have him over at Ayodhya. And Rish would help perform the Putrakameshti Yagya that Dasharath was just talking about. Dasharath would then have 4 sons as a result of the ritual. You know, that's weirdly specific, and I don't know why you didn't bring up all of this earlier. But we have no time to lose. Let's go recruit Rish the Rishi, said Dasharath. And that's exactly what they did. They offered Rish a generous sign-on bonus and great perks. Rish, who had already ended a drought in one kingdom, was more than happy to build up his portfolio further. It would look really good on his resume the next time a king came looking for him. Rish went to Ayodhya. The horse wandered back to Ayodhya about the same time. Although, if it knew what was in store, it would not have returned at all. As part of the ritual, 300 other animals, birds, snakes, and horses and turtles had been gathered up. Queen Kaushalya stepped up to the poor horse who had only helped expand the kingdom. She raised her sword and struck the horse until it died. Others joined in, and all the 300 animals were killed. That was followed by a garden variety sacrifice, the Putrakameshti Yagya, which basically involved pouring a lot of common household items and kitchen ingredients in a large fire. Once that was concluded, it was time to pay the holy men who had performed all the rituals. Dasharath magnanimously offered his whole kingdom to them. We don't want the white elephant, the holy men said. Give us instead gold, silver, gems and the like, liquid assets. So Dasharath gave them 100 million gold pieces and 400 million silver coins, which is probably a lot to carry. In the end, Rish assured the king that he would have 4 sons. Meanwhile in heaven, the sacrifice had prompted most of the gods to take up a grievance with Brahma. Brahma, if you recall, is the creator in the Trinity, along with Shiva the destroyer and Vishnu the preserver. You see, Brahma frequently made house calls to everyone who prayed to him and granted pretty much anything they asked for, as you may recall from many of the previous episodes. Also, Brahma just happens to be my dad. The gods were complaining about Ravan. Ravan was the king of Lanka, and he's the supervillain in the Ramayana. Ravan had prayed for a long time to Brahma, and Brahma had, as a result, given him practically unlimited powers and made him invulnerable to all gods. The gods complained to Brahma that Ravan was a menace. The gods he hadn't killed were all terrified of him. Brahma thought a long moment and said, "I've built in a loophole, and by that I mean Ravan did not ask to be made invulnerable to humans. He was probably being arrogant, or maybe he just forgot. Doesn't matter. What matters is that he can be defeated by a human." This seemed to cheer up the gods, though it may seem like it shouldn't, because it's by no means easy for an ordinary human being to take on a being of phenomenal cosmic powers like Ravan. As it happened, Vishnu happened to drift around just then, and the gods immediately switched their attention to him. It may seem like instead of Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer would be a better choice when asking to, destroy Ravan. But Vishnu may have just been in the right place at the right time. The gods asked him to assume one of his avatars and go destroy Ravan. Vishnu at this point had already used up 6 of his 10 avatars, but had no hesitation in using another one up. Vishnu pulled up the playbook and instructed many of the gods to be born on earth as part of a monkey army. We'll encounter them later in the Ramayana. Vishnu himself decided to be born as Dasharath's sons. That's right, sons. Vishnu was a part of all 4 sons, not just Ram. To set that plan in motion, he sent down one of the gods with a jar of porridge. Dasharath and his ministers and holy men did not even bat an eyelid when the god suddenly appeared in the fire with the jar of porridge. "Here's your package," the god said. "Sign here to accept delivery. All you have to do is ask your queens to eat this porridge." Dasharath was overjoyed and took the jar, which did not even burn his fingers, despite just coming out of hot flames. In what is going to sound like a middle school arithmetic problem, Dasharath gave half the jar to Kaushalya, a third to Sumitra. He then gave 1/8 to Kaikeyi, and gave the rest to Sumitra again. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you how much Sumitra received. And not long after, Dasharath's wives had sons. Bharat was born to Kaikeyi, Lakshman and Shatrughna were Sumitra's, and Kaushalya gave birth to Rama. All 4 sons were part Vishnu, and, in a twist that shows you that arithmetic can't solve all problems, the proportion of Vishnu in the sons had nothing to do with the amount of porridge each queen consumed. That's it for this week. We can go into more details about Ravan's origin story in a separate standalone episode at some point. The character this week is Rani Lakshmi Bai, the Rani of Jhansi. Rani Lakshmi Bai was born in a Marathi family and was known to do a lot of things that weren't expected or even available to girls during that time. And by that, I mean reading, writing, shooting, fencing, horse riding, and even an acrobat's version of yoga. So yeah, pretty much everything there was to do in the 1800s. She later married the Maharaja of Jhansi. When the Maharaja passed away, the British East India Company used some flimsy excuse to deny the Queen and her adopted son the right to manage the kingdom, and instead took on the task themselves. I'm sure they'll claim they did it with great reluctance. A few years later, when there was a major rebellion against the British, and as that spread to Jhansi, the resident British forces were massacred. Rani Lakshmibai seized the opportunity to rule herself, and a year or so later, the British came back. And when she wouldn't give up the throne, they besieged her fort. She managed to escape with her baby son strapped to her back by literally jumping off the side of a fort. Have a look at some of the forts. Being able to survive such a fall is a superpower by itself. She escaped to Gwalior, but within a short time, Gwalior was itself attacked. Lakshmi Bai disguised herself as an ordinary soldier, but was killed in battle. She is a symbol of fearlessness and a major role model for everyone because of her grit and bravery and because she defied a lot of stereotypes. Next week, we'll take a break from the Ramayana and go back to Vikram and Betal, where the Betal is going to throw out another lateral thinking puzzle for us. The name of the character next week literally means strong-armed. There's a pretty big statue of him in southern India, and he's not quite like how he was shown in some recent blockbuster movies. Since I'm several thousands of years old, my memory may be faulty at times. If you find any errors in my podcast, please point them out to me. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave a comment or a review on the site. It's sfipodcast.com and the Twitter handle is @sfipodcast. Again, I'd like to thank my family and friends for all of their support. The feedback that I have received has been very useful in improving the show. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next week.